everybody. You're listening to and watching the Comic Book Bears podcast. I'm Bill Zanowitz.
I'm Brian Pittard.
I'm Steve Morey.
And I'm Caleb Alexander McKenzie.
And we are your four heavy homos. I'll do that again for the audio. Four hairy, heavy homos that read comics and talk about them, but you don't have to be a hairy, heavy homo to listen in or to enjoy the stream here. And we don't have any guests tonight. We don't have any overarching theme. We're just going to be talking about some comics that we're reading and we're digging. Might get into some recent news. Something that has become a mainstay of the video streams, though, is where we get all what are you wearing and show the t-shirts that we're having. So let me start with Brian. What are you wearing there?
So I actually just got this shirt today in the mail from my friends in Orlando, specifically Bill. Charlando, which Steve is a little bit familiar with because he's been around us in Charlotte, is half of the Char and then Orlando teams that have come together in curling. A group of us friends from the two clubs and have kind of made this new thing. So I was very excited. I actually had a whole other wardrobe picked out for tonight, and then I got this and I had to put it on. So that's what my Charlando shirt is. And you can't see the back, and I'm not going to get up and get all moved. But it's pretty cool. I'll find a thing to put up later or something.
Awesome.
Okay. Caleb, how about you?
Mine's just kind of boring and generic. It's an old shirt. It's from a brand called Sin Clothing Line. I bought it when I was like 21 or 22 because, it was Sin and that was fun and it was edgy. So I bought it and it is, it's been through the ringer and it's like my comfy shirt. So
okay, cool.
Comfy shirts are good.
Yep. Steve, how about you?
I am wearing Bing Bong.
Oh.
If you remember from Inside Out, which basically is the part that makes everybody cry.
Okay. My shirt, I'm going to have to stand a little bit for you to get the full effect here.
Ooh.
This is a t-shirt called St. Folsom, and it came out from Killer Bob Graphics, as you can tell from the image there. It's primarily bear and BDSM leather imagery. They currently, I just was checking on the website because just wanted to confirm it was called St. Folsom. And they are not taking any orders right now because of COVID-19. They're a San Francisco-based company. But once that embargo is over, if you do want to have a shirt that's as hot as this one, you can go there. Just like Brian, there's an image on the back of a boot print, but I'm not going to go.
It's definitely, if you're looking for some new church clothes, that's where you're.
Yeah, there's a universe out there with that.
Depends on where you're going to go worship is really what you're saying.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, like
there are various different types of altars.
I mean, it's called church, but it's right next to the Eagle in Atlanta.
Well, at Bear Week, and I think other bear events, there is a church on Sunday that's like a tea dance. They call it church.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One of my favorite experiences, since we're talking about Folsom, in New York, there's Folsom Street East, which borrows from the Folsom Fairs primarily out in West Coast. And Scores, if you ever listen to the Howard Stern show, Scores is a very predominant, titty club. And it's basically two doors down from the Eagle. And I always love going into Scores because there's, really people in there and the air conditioning is blasting. So, and they were always really cool in there. So, and they would open up during Folsom Street East. So,
nice.
What's the old saying? A lot of people are on their knees, but not everybody's praying.
I don't understand what that is.
I've never taken communion.
It was research.
But whatever.
All right. Anyway, I guess we can talk about some little bits of news that have come out from San Diego ComicCon at home. Has anybody been watching or listening to the streams? Because I have while I've been working.
I really wanted to go to the humanoids panel because Mark Russell was on it, and I was very excited. And then I had no internet all day. So yeah.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, that's the really unfortunate thing too. And I for some of these panels, they're on right when I'm in the middle of work, and unfortunately today was a big meeting day and conference call day, so I was unable to listen to all that much until after 5-6 o'clock, and then it was like, you're on the
Well, I
East.
kind of lucked out. Yeah, well, I kind of lucked out because I am between engagements right now. I have the new engagement starting on Monday, so this week was effectively like a continuing ed week. So I was able to at least put him on while I was doing some other stuff. So I did catch the Batgirls panel, which had a bunch of creators talking about the various iterations of Batgirl. Listen to the Action Figure Insider 15th anniversary one, called The Boys, when there was some news out of that, and that there's going to be a season 3 of The Boys, and there's also going to be a post show hosted by Aisha Tyler, she hosted the panel as well, so that was pretty cool.
I mean,
yeah, and and some of the footage they showed was amazing. It's like all of a sudden I'm excited again,
what about the news about New Mutants? Because
the non-news about mutants.
Or non-news.
I think a lot of people were going into that panel expecting them to make some kind of video on demand announcement, but as of now, it's still going to be August 28th in the theaters. And then there was some speculation on IGN that actually, Disney's hands may be tied on this because there may be some existing streaming contracts that are out there that might prevent, because there are some situations where if a film is initially set to go to for a theatrical release and then gets pulled for a video on demand, or in the older days, direct to video, sometimes it would take a financial hit because you would have to pay producers and directors a fee for that. And again, with all the complications and with the Fox X-Men movies, and still you don't have all of them on the Disney series, that there may be some existing contracts out there which is preventing it from being a video on demand.
Well, I mean, that sounds really plausible because I know the other big movies that they were talking about, Mulan especially, that's one that's going to be just pushed off indefinitely, but it has to be in the theaters. Now that I think might just be because Disney can make a shit ton of money overseas in theaters with it, and especially in China, they're probably banking on quite a bit of interest and making a lot of money there. And obviously in the US, it would make a ton of money too if it were in theaters, if we were able to have open theaters. And since everything was supposed to be like AMC and Crown Cinemas and all those other ones were supposed to be open, or Regal was supposed to be open, the 15th last week. And then it was pushed to possibly the 31st, which, I mean, we're a week away from the 31st right now. That's probably not going to happen. Or at least in the biggest parts of the country where they would be making any kind of money on it. Tenet got booted until who knows when, sometime in August or never. Not never. I mean, nothing's going to be never. It's just they're definitely, like anything that's a blockbuster, they're just going to keep kicking that can down the road until they can, until they can get open up. Which is why everybody's screaming for on demand for Black Widow. Forget it. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. You're just not going to see it this year. And then even Avatar and the next Star Wars movie, whenever that would be,
those got pushed back like each a year.
Yeah, so we're looking at at 2022 for and for the next ones of those. So
yeah, God knows what September is going to look like with some television series. I've heard that Big Brother is starting filming despite COVID.
They should just keep them all in confessional pods. They just get their own little confessional room, and that's it. They stay there for 6 weeks.
Yeah, that'll be interesting.
Why not?
So I think that was basically like the only news that we've gotten so far out of what we had there. I haven't seen anything else. Again, DC's first real panel is going to be tomorrow. I did watch the Marvel 616, the new documentary series that's coming out. Fairly interesting. The only issue with that is it has a different director for each episode, and sometimes there isn't a continuity of feel. With those, that's something I'm anticipating.
That's weird. So
So,
they're doing a documentary with different directors per episodes.
Yeah, well, 30 for 30 operates like that.
That's true.
Yeah. But again, with
I like
30 for
concept.
30, I think there's a lack of a consistent feel isn't as disruptive as it would be with something like this.
Yeah, because each episode of 30 for 30 kind of focuses on a different, a broadly different topic, correct? Or am I just off the mark on that?
No, they're all very different.
Yeah.
Either a player, a coach, a team, a situation. Who was the one? They had that great 30 for 30 that was about the woman who used to run onto fields during baseball games and kiss players. What was the Kissing Bandit or something like that? It was a great thing, but it didn't even have anything to do with like the actual sport. It was more about the fan of the sport and like what happened afterwards.
But their definition of sports is pretty broad. I mean, it extends to the Nathan's hot dog eating contest.
really?
Yeah.
I don't know. What am I? I'm a curler. It's probably people think we're not a sport, so whatever. We had a couple comments in the chat I want to highlight real quick.
Hello, chat.
Cool.
Dave, our buddy, who now completely funded and Kickstarter,
congratulations.
And while we're congratulations to Tom Kelly, who also got fully funded.
Oh, excellent. So Big Brother filming during COVID seems like the log line for that show, which fair. And then we got Tony who joined us here.
Hey, Tony.
Good evening.
Good evening, Tony.
So I finally met Tony in person at an ELO concert a couple of years ago after talking with him forever.
Oh. Nice.
Hello.
Yeah. He's Pennsylvania.
Ah.
Yeah. I don't know why that Pennsylvania just like dropped everything there.
That's Pennsylvania.
That's where my roots are from. So we're all Pennsylvania people.
You want to start talking comics, Steve? Tell us about something you're reading that you're digging.
Well, I've been reading a bunch of random stuff, but what I picked up new this past week that was a kind of hit a lot of people in their, possibly cool lists or check it out lists was Engine Word or Engine Ward, however way you want to say it. And this one's actually written by George Mann with art by Joe Eisma, who's somebody I've been following for a while. Since the days of Morning Glories, which I loved so much and will probably never get finished. But George Mann, I haven't read too much from him. He's done a lot of Doctor Who. He's done several novels, and has worked with Titan Comics before. But this is actually being put out by Vault.
Mm-hmm.
Gorgeous design actually on this series. But basically, the quick pitch on it is that this is a far distant future of humanity. Earth is basically a myth or a legend that they mispronounce, and they have a lot of. It's almost like scripture, the legend of how humans came to the stars. Where Earth is just sort of like, might as well be the Garden of Eden. And in this on this planet, the humans there are, working with archaeologists and treasure hunters just to find, different artifacts about the history of humanity and the original arcs. And at the same time, it appears to be ruled by a council of elites that may be a little bit more than human, that are based on the signs of the zodiac. So you have all these characters that are Cancer, Gemini, Molluth, Sagittarius, etc. And of course, in the first issue, we're just being introduced to them, as well as some of the main characters that are non-Zodiac related. You have Joss, who is sort of a scrappy tinkerer, an inventor. Her golem or droid, basically. Creek, who is very much like a mixture of C-3PO and, well, basically every other kind of sarcastic, unhappy droid that you may have seen in pop culture, with some great, comedic lines. You also have Ichabod, who's her, I'm guessing kind of like her partner, who is more of a treasure hunter, archaeologist, adventure seeker. And his friend Jervix, who also goes on these expeditions with him. And then Captain Nipin, who seems to run the settlement, the human settlement in the city, or at least as much as one can be an administrator when you've got basically the Zodiac Council ahead of, over everything. The Celestials is what they call them. And of course, we know from Marvel, every time you deal with somebody like the Celestials, they are well beyond the worries of humanity and potentially don't give a shit, and basically use their power willy-nilly whenever they want. There's obviously not a lot of great things going on in the human settlement now. They have water shortages. There seems to be poverty. There's a lot of things that they're lacking. So this first issue kind of introduces us to this world, to these characters, to this concept. But one of the best things about this, and George Mann, I think this really kind of speaks to his, to his prose, is that he's telling this story in little editorial asides throughout the first half of the book, retelling this legend of Earth and legend of the first humans and how the humans destroyed their Earth and then came to the stars. And it's that sort of background prose, almost sort of like a chant in the background while action's happening and while dialogue's happening on the page besides, that really to me is very intriguing. And I've been reading a lot of Asimov lately, getting ready for next year's Foundation series. So I've been rereading all of Foundation, and there's a lot of that kind of that similar feel to it, where it's this epic future history that is not fully understood yet, definitely not understood by the characters in the story, but is very intriguing. For me, I do really enjoy, of course, Joe Eisman's art. He's not for everybody. And I think, Bill, when we've talked in the past about Morning Glories, I think you had mentioned a couple things about he's kind of sketchy. Right. Like his art's a little sketchy in places.
Well, my issue with Morning Glories wasn't the art.
Really?
No, I think Spencer is terrible at follow through. Yeah. And if that series ever ends, we'll find out for sure. But my issues with Morning Glory weren't the artist, and I also like Eisma in that he's another one of these artists like Immerman that really adapts his style to what he's tasked to do. Yeah. If you look at his art from Dynamo 5, which was a great Image series about superheroes,
yes,
written by Jay Ferber, you could say, wow, I can't believe that's the same artist. Yeah. My issues with Morning Glory were totally not the art.
I love his art. I really enjoy it. One of the criticisms that people have had in the past, and I think this happens, depending on the series that he's working on, is that some of his characters look very similar. Some of the character designs, facial features can be hard to tell apart. This book is not going to have that problem because of how different and how interestingly characters like the Celestials are designed. I doubt there's going to be any problems here with, I don't know who's who.
That almost looks kind of Legion.
So that there's a lot of things. Everybody has their symbol. Everybody has, some kind of representation of potentially the Zodiac symbol that they're embodying. There's a lot of heavy tech worked in, and I love that kind of stuff. And of course, the one thing that's going to happen to kick everything off, a ancient piece of human tech from Earth is discovered. It happens to be a golem or a cyborg, and it turns on in the end, which activates a lot of things. So
Okay, so a golem, as in the traditional Jewish.
no, it's a golem is basically a
or...
droid.
Okay,
it's a droid. So the words are, of course, affected by the setting. But I think that this is a really cool concept. I'm really hoping that this is going to continue well. I'm not sure if this has been delayed a little bit by COVID, but hopefully, because it's starting after the great comic shutdown of 2020, that they've had a lot of time to actually make sure that everything's going to be on time. Because I'm excited to see this on a monthly basis.
So I'm a little bummed. I was trying to throw up some pictures of the artwork from this book in the comments section, but apparently you can't do picture comments this way. So if you want to see what some of the work on the interiors look like, check, I mean, a lot of it reminds me of what work you'll see like in Second Coming. Like it's kind of got that same flair to it.
Well, and the colors are great too. I do want to shout out to Michael Garland, who's doing a really good job with making sure that each setting feels different with the color palettes that he's using. And of course, the Celestials, more than the humans, are given extremely bright colors. So there's like a lot of, you can tell the difference between the two. Humans are kind of, dirty and poor. And then you have the Celestials that are super wealthy and technologically advanced and, don't really care about the little people. And letters, of course, by Hassan Atsmani Al-Haw. But gorgeous book. And good intro to this world. So hopefully it keeps up that level, that pace, and continues through the next several months. I believe I want to say it's a 5-part series. But again, things change sometimes.
Okay. Let's go over to Brian. Brian, tell us about something you're digging.
So I had a few things I was considering for this week, but after reading about Representative John Lewis's passing last week, I realized that that's probably what I should be reading and learning about. And it's funny because we talked about this before the show. I think we all have a copy of this, some physically accessible, possibly, others somewhere else.
Yeah, there are two of us.
Or it's gone.
That our copies are just gone.
So
just
you
missing
probably
somewhere.
read it
and I'm sure
and gave it to somebody else to read. That's my guess.
I've never even read it. I didn't even have the chance to read it. But
that's actually
I have no idea where it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
I swore I bought it. Go ahead.
If you're not familiar with the work of John Lewis, and I will be honest, I was not. I was talking to my boyfriend about this earlier. I really think I was done a huge disservice when I, was learning about the civil rights movement and in school back, when I was, younger and never following up to really flesh that knowledge out. And that was my own, shortcoming. But when we were taught about the civil rights movement, a lot of it was compressed, and pretty much the only name besides Rosa Parks that comes out of it is Martin Luther King. And obviously that's not possible. There were many people involved, but what the 3-volume series of graphic novels from Top Shelf teaches you and gives you a perspective on is just how chaotic, but also how amazingly grassroots and put together everything was. And John Lewis played an enormous part of it. Starting with pretty much his work with the SNCC, which was the Students Nonviolence Coordinating Committee. Which is an organization I found out is still around in some form, which I didn't realize. But taking you from his sort of beginnings as a small, as a rural, living on a farm, taking care of chickens, which is kind of fun, pretty much all the way through his formative, career. And I'll be honest, I haven't finished the 3rd volume, so I'm not quite sure. Caleb, do you remember where it kind of takes you to in the 3rd volume? I don't remember. I didn't get that far.
I haven't read the series since 2018.
Okay.
So I started rereading it actually last night, and I'm in the middle of the 3rd volume. But
It's thick. The third one's like a beast.
Yeah. It is, and in a lot of ways, the third one, I mean, I think it kind of revisits, and I think that's part of the reason it's bigger, because it does revisit some of the some of the stuff that they had already spoken about, but not a lot. I mean, there's a lot of Dr. King in the third book. I want to say it gets into some of the Nixon presidential race.
Okay, so it goes farther into the, yeah, okay. One of the things you mentioned, Martin Luther King, of course, big part of the movement to most people. In fact, I remember some of the things happening recently. I'm going to talk about in relation to this, but King gets brought up a lot, and there was these memes going around about, oh yeah, he was nonviolent, he did this, and so you guys should be nonviolent too. Well, that really does a disservice to his legacy, but it also does a disservice to the movement, because Martin Luther King was a figurehead of the movement, but he was not. And this book really plays that out and gives you that perspective. He was not necessarily always on the same page with the movement, and or the movement was that fractured in like how to proceed. So that's fascinating too. Seeing kind of like the behind the scenes elements, especially the organizing of the March on Washington. The fact that they tapped this, basically, at the time even, he was known as a gay black man who was a phenomenal organizer. And there was a lot of concern that might, discredit the movement because they could tie him to communism and blah, blah, blah. So like, there's a lot in this that's really interesting. But I want to focus on is, the artwork. I should talk about the book itself, like the art by Nate Powell, which if you're not familiar with his stuff, he's got some great autobio kind of comics, and he's got some great, like, not fiction, but maybe like historical fiction or based on real events stuff. I was just flipping through some of it. It's really good, very good cartooning. And then the writer, so John Lewis co-wrote this with Andrew Iden, and show some of that art. Like, really good acting a lot of times, good storytelling, so much. You're like Vanna. I'm glad you're doing that there, because on my phone it's just not as exciting. But Andrew Aiden is he studied like comics and the civil rights movement, and how the 1957 Martin Luther King and the Montgomery Story comic, which I have not read, which I now need to go get, sort of like gave him the inspiration to do this for John Lewis. So he wrote it with John Lewis, and that they're kind of a team in this. But the interesting things that I'm drawing from it, and I encourage you guys to go out right now and get this book, is the parallels with today, because there is everything happening today in certain forms that happened in the 60s and 50s and even into like the late 60s. Because the civil rights movement also was not just the 60s. It spanned a whole like almost 30 year period. We think about things like the March on Washington, Civil Rights Bill, everything's amazing, but it was a whole progression that had all kinds of fits and starts and regional changes happening by city to city. So, people who are familiar with the gay rights and the whole right to marriage for LGBT, before it got to Supreme Court, there were all these little, this community in this city, in this state, kind of like that. But in this case, the states were flat out saying, fuck you, federal government, we're not going to do what you want. We're not going to desegregate. And I don't think that all sunk into me, at least as a student, when I learned about this in high school. So I was really, enlightened by reading this. But the parallels go deeper. Like, so not only do you have this federal state thing going on like we have today, and kind of a weird inversion in today's situation with the stuff going on in Portland, but you have all of this boiling tension with protesters and the police, and how the police historically were the enforcement arm for these horrible segregation laws. I mean, I don't even know how many times John Lewis got arrested in his life, but the book puts a lot of them on the page, and not just arrested, but like beaten and abused and yelled at and just harassed. Like, it is devastating to me as a person of privilege and being a white cisgender male to see this and to reconcile that is like my legacy. And I'm from Florida. I'm from the South. So it's a lot for me to process. And it's devastating. It's really devastating because I see, again, the legacy of it still happening today. And that's hard too. But I also am very inspired by John Lewis and the groups that he was a part of that organized the protests, because they absolutely accomplished a huge amount of change through nonviolence. And that means a lot, and that says a lot to me. Thinking about, don't give your adversary the reason to escalate the violence. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's like an interesting perspective that the SNCC pulled from, like Gandhi and other nonviolent, people in history, but specifically Gandhi. So they could sit there in a restaurant and just sit there and say, we want to be served food. You're not going to serve us. We're just going to sit here nonviolently, just sit there and stay. And that kind of protest is huge, and it is a direct through line to today, when you have people, most of which, in fact, really any of the violence that people are saying is happening is like graffiti, which isn't violence, or a little bit of property damage, which is pretty minor, right? And so, this nonviolent confrontation sort of progression is all the way through into what we've seen after the death of George Floyd, and even before that. So we've got some great comments in here. I don't want to completely ignore them. Jim has a great offering here, and I have not. So it's funny, the Stuck Rubber Baby, I can't find a copy. It's not digital.
It should be. It was out of print for a brief period of time, but it should be back in and available.
Very
if you get an actual
no
copy of it hard.
DC Vertigo has been very good about keeping that in print.
Yeah.
Okay, because when I looked a couple months ago
I think
it, I
it was
couldn't
a
get
very short. Yeah, that may have just been while you were waiting for a new printing.
That could be them.
Just because Amazon doesn't have it doesn't mean it's out of print.
Fair. No, that's fair. And I hadn't been to stores to look for it, but
but DC's been really good about keeping that in print.
Yeah. Thanks, James.
Yeah. We got Rick here who also loves this. Yeah. So basically, some good comments here about the Stuck Rubber Baby, and that's when we talked about Howard Cruz recently when he passed. That was the time I was really looking for it, and of course, it's probably out of print because he just passed away. But whatever.
James is saying it's been out of print for many years, so maybe I'm wrong.
It is back in print. It's just
I
think it depends on where you're trying to get it, because there are some distributors that don't have it.
My copy's a 2010 version, so
yeah.
But Brian, what you were saying? What you were saying? I'm sorry.
Go ahead. So I'm so sorry. Go, man.
I was going to say what you were saying about the nonviolence, and there's a couple of things, because you're from Florida, I'm from Arkansas. Same thing. That's kind of deep South roots, and I was taught all the stuff about Rosa Parks, and we heard about Dr. King, but the rest of this stuff was not taught. Little Rock has a very close-knit relationship to the civil rights movement. This is where the Little Rock 9 happened, at Central High School in Arkansas. I grew up 45 minutes from Little Rock. I never heard about this until I went to college. That's how isolated and kept away from us it was. And whether that was intentional or just overlooked because of other things, I can speculate on, but it just wasn't told to us. The nonviolence aspect, this idea of don't make these people escalate to that point. It wasn't even that. They stood there or sat there or laid there and let grown men beat them with sticks and actively chose not to fight back. I can't do that. I functionally couldn't do that. That's how much these individuals had.
We were talking about that earlier. My boyfriend and I, we were kind of discussing how the sort of younger movement, which is another interesting thing I want to come back to, but the younger millennial kind of generation, it is not in their nature to hold back. They have grown up expressing themselves in one way or another throughout the internet or through whatever means their whole lives. And so to tell them, no, stand there and take the abuse is just not possible. And for me as well, I would love to think that I'm a stoic and I do it kind of in some way philosophically kind of align or think about that. But I know that if someone was coming at me the way they came at these civil rights protesters, the freedom riders that were trying to basically, even after it was legal federally, were trying to take buses around the South, and were getting like beaten and arrested and firebombed. Exactly. Like it's crazy to think that they would just sit there. My not my favorite scene, because it's not a favorite, but the most memorable and horrifying was they were in like a Woolworths or something, and the owner just turned off the lights and left. But before he left, turned on a bug fumigation system and like almost poisoned them to death. Yeah. And they're just sitting there like, well, this can't be, like, he's going to come back. This isn't a thing, right? And they're also waiting to wait it out until they were arrested. And by the way, when they were arrested, they don't post bail, because posting bail feeds money back into the system that is inherently unjust. Again, really great commitment. And like the fact that John Lewis, I mean, I know so many people admire and revere John Lewis, so I am coming very much late to the party, and I admit that freely. But I also don't think that I'm the last white man to not know about this. And so it is doing him, I hope, some service to spread this word and recommend this book. It's critical to know our history, because as we are seeing right now, we are potentially doomed to repeat things if we don't learn and grow from that past. So I don't know if there was something I was going to connect back to, but I think I did. So there we go.
So, Bill, there's an interesting thing in this that I think you'll get a kick out of too. The thing that Brian's talking about, like the difference in generations, is actually hit on very well in this book. So, my generation is different than the generations that came before, and we kind of, for the gay rights movement, have different ideas on how things can be handled. In this, there's actually a moment to where John Lewis, as a young man, is like having this introspective internal dialogue with and about what Thurgood Marshall is saying. Because at one point, Thurgood Marshall's like, hey, you guys did a great job. You made your point. Now stop. Just be done. Like, go home. Stop. And he's looking, he's like, you're Thurgood Marshall. How can you tell us to quit? And which is not necessarily what Thurgood Marshall was saying, but he, in his mind, had reached all that he could see the movement doing. And you had guys like John Lewis who saw it going so much further. And you kind of apply that to the same thing. When the first brick was thrown at Stonewall, those people had an idea that what gay rights could get to. And then you had Harvey Milk, and then you had, the mid 80s came along and everything that went with that. And then you have my generation. And, the Bostock decision just came out, which for the first time, we talk about gay marriage, and a lot of people, I think, get to the point that they're like, oh, queers can get married now, which, I am, but that's the end all be all. Up until 3 weeks ago, you could fire me for being gay. In Arkansas, you can kick me. If I wasn't a homeowner, you could deny me housing and or evict me if you found out I had a husband.
And you can still deny health care to trans individuals now because of the Trump administration. Like, that's not a guarantee.
And you can take this and you can branch it out into, the movement for civil rights for African Americans and for brown and black people. We can't imagine the what they've been through, but we also can't imagine the lengths that they can see those movements stretching to. And that's why it's so important to listen to the words of the young people who are at the forefront, because they've got a vision of what those rights can look like 50 years from now. And in 50 years from now, there's going to be a new generation. So like I found that the most poignant, because when I think of Thurgood Marshall, I'm a law nerd, so I'm just like Thurgood Marshall.
You'll lose that. No, I think one of the most interesting things that was said, though, was Caleb, when you were talking about the things that you weren't taught in school. I'm also in the same boat, that I did not know about the desegregation of Central Little Rock High School until college. But from my local perspective, we knew about, in social studies class, we knew about the Newark riots inside out. And I'm sure that almost nobody had that in their curriculum growing up. So it is interesting, the regional, I don't want to say bias, but the regional perspective in education offers sometimes. And I'm certain there, for me, Malcolm X was a footnote, and I'm certain that there were many people afterwards in high school had much bigger exposure just because there was effectively more product out there, and the information was far more easily accessible and not tinged, to use a polite word. I think that's really interesting of growing up and being educated under a regional perspective. Sometimes it just how it affects you going forward.
Well,
sometimes I just think it's worth mentioning.
To that point, though, with the whole regional thing, I found out a few years ago that there was a massacre in Ocoee, Florida, which is, if you know Orlando and Central Florida, Ocoee is like 45 minutes, not even, outside of downtown Orlando. It's actually like 30 minutes. And there was a massacre of a black community, kind of like a small Tulsa, Black Wall Street thing. I mean, and I did not learn this growing up. So I think there is a regional component, and there is 100% a glossing over.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
The through line I've seen to this day is the fact that these there's this book is the march is full of these people in these communities raging against these black men, women, and people who just wanted basic decency and to be treated fairly and equally. And they were so challenged by this somehow that you had governors like saying that there was some threat of tyranny and that we were trying to project the Anglo-Saxon way and all of this very race, like white supremacy bullshit. And you think, oh, that was 60s. That was like 60 years ago. But you still see the embers of that today. And I would even say in some areas, it's not even embers. It's full on smolder fire. It's like it's still alive. Yeah. And being confronted with this, and especially in this time when we're seeing these people standing up and really demanding that cops just don't kill black people, it's just it's a slap in the face to the fact that we thought we had gone so far. And the framing story of this whole book is Barack Obama's inauguration. And so I think everybody in 2008 was very like, rah, 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 we've ended racism. We're great now. And everything's good. And it's like, no, it's not. It's
proven wrong in 2010.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you're really,
I don't think I can give a strong enough endorsement for this book. And I want everyone out there to take a moment. It's $10 on Amazon, Kindle, Nook, whatever your platform, Apple Books. Just get it.
Because I can't find my damn copy.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to
get a digital. Get it, and you can have it in your fingers in like seconds, and just read at least that first volume. Get through it. I guarantee you'll probably get the next one as soon as you finish because you're just going to be so gripped by it. And educate yourself about this because only then can we really better understand this current moment we're in and better be prepared to discuss it with people because like I didn't have this information to discuss with my parents who lived through it. And I don't know that they know all of this because they were probably shielded by being in the South, So please go check this out.
And just as a book into that, while you're educating yourself about the Black Rights Movement and standing up against cops, look up Huey Newton and Bobby Seale and learn about Huey Newton and Bobby Seale because we aren't taught that either. And those are some dudes.
Awesome.
I learned more about Huey Newton in the Public Enemy lyrics than I ever did in any kind of formal education. Yep. Just before we move, there's a lot of people online, so I just want to say some hellos. So for people tuning in, just want to thank David Toby and Tyler William George, Christian Sowards, Pete Leahy, Michael Emig, Tony Giulio, Craig Lance is on there. So just wanted to say hi to people. Really appreciate you tuning in. It seems we're getting more and more people each week and more people staying each week. So that's great. I'm going to throw over to our sleeveless wonder there, Caleb. So tell us about a book you're reading that you're digging.
Well, I guess it's History Week on the Comic Book Bears, and this wasn't done purposely, but I try not to do this too often because there's a lot of love to spread out there. But last week, 2 weeks ago, my Wolf of the Week was this new graphic novel from Image called Paul is Dead. I read it and immediately was like, okay, let's go with this one because it's amazing. But when I was talking about it, I thought that this was going to be a alternate universe story of where Paul died instead of John Lennon. So look, let me preface this. I am a Beatles fan. I like them. I'm not an encyclopedic font of music history knowledge like somebody whose name is Bill Zanowitz. But I had no idea that this is an actual conspiracy theory. And I forgive me if I'm insulting any of our Beatles fans with my ignorance. So bear with me. But I had no idea that this was a real thing. That there was an actual conspiracy theory about this idea that Paul McCartney died in a car wreck as they were recording Abbey Road, and they replaced him with a lookalike.
It's not a theory.
So I was actually I was reading a Rolling Stone article about this, and one of the funniest quotes I saw was that the lookalike apparently wrote, off the top of my head, I can't remember which songs it were, so he should have had Paul's job anyway. That was really funny. But so in the story, this book by Paolo Baron and Ernesto Carbonetti, it covers this conspiracy theory from a realistic perspective. John Lennon wakes up one day as they're in the studio and no one's around, and he's kind of got a hangover or whatever, and he gets a phone call, and on the other end of that call is one of my favorite figures in Beatle history and lore. It's Brian Epstein, and he's like, I got something to tell you. And it's like, what? Like, what shit are you fixing to beat now? And he just says, it's Paul. He's dead. And he thinks he's just bullshit. And he's like, is this a publicity stunt? Like, what are we don't need the money. We're the Beatles. This is ridiculous. Call Ringo, call the guys, get them in quit fucking around. And then Brian just says, no, like, I had to call you and tell you because you're the one who needs to know this, but he's dead in real life. And not only is this a problem for the band, obviously, this is a national security issue because people are so crazed and so in love with the band that there are going to be hundreds of people who commit suicide over this, that kill themselves over this. We can't let that happen. We can't let this leak out. So I need you to go talk to George and Ringo, and I need you to go let them know what happened. But we've got to start finding a replacement. We've got to start finding a lookalike who can play the bass. We'll stick him in the back. It'll be fine. But we can't let this get out. Or like literally the Queen was involved in covering this up because it was that much of a national security issue. And, John is losing it at this point. Like he's being sent pictures. Brian Epstein shows him pictures of the car wreck. Like he's seeing this event in which his friend dies. And it just kind of breaks him. He goes and gets George and Ringo, and he gets them in the car, and he tells them, he kind of lets them know what's going on. And they just, they functionally fall apart. Like there's this moment where they can't go on. They don't trust one another. They don't know how to make this album that they're making, which ended up being Abbey Road. They start letting some of the stuff seep into their lyrics. They start letting some of the visuals get out. And of course, Brian Epstein is behind the scenes trying to hold this whole thing together. Towards the end of the story, and this is the neat part. So I'm going to kind of spoil it a little bit, if that's okay. But because of where the conspiracy comes in, like this is well known if your name isn't Caleb Alexander McKenzie. But towards the end of it, John breaks in to Paul McCartney's home. And he goes and he's standing in this living room that's bare. There's guitars on the wall. It's, he's shuffling around in the dark, and he's looking around for everything. And as he's in there, he hears something else. Somebody else is breaking into the home. And it's this figure, and he's kind of in a hoodie, and he's clouded, and you can't see him. And John just assaults this guy. And it's Paul. And Paul has this moment. John's just like, what the hell? How could you do this to us? And Paul had this moment that the book lays out really well. He couldn't deal with the fame. They had gotten to a breaking point, and he had to, in the story, he fakes his own death. Now, in this story, it talks about him being sucked back in and drawn back into the band, and getting back into the studio. They go on to be the Beatles, and they go on to do all the psychedelic and fun stuff that we know and love. But it kind of frames it as this idea of no, like this actually did happen, but it was him faking his own death, scaring the shit out of his friends, and getting sucked back into the band like kind of a midlife band crisis. I thought it was fascinating. Carbonetti's art in this, like I can just kind of open to any page. It is surreal. It is ethereal, maybe is the right way to put it. It almost has this watercolor look, even though I think it's done with marker. He uses a little bit of a pop art style, but really imagine like pop art, but you paint over with black and then you scratch everything up. He does this incredible work, like you almost want to call it a caricature, but I don't think that that's fair. I don't think that that's a fair assessment of what the work is. But you get a likeness that is not it's photo referential, but it's not. It's almost, it's uncanny the way that it's laid out. A little bit of a European flair, obviously. Both of the guys who wrote this are musicians themselves. They're both huge Beatles fans. They love it. They love the music. They love the art. And all of that really comes through. It really comes through in this. And for somebody who is not baptized in the Beatles, obviously, because I haven't heard this apparently very well known and very famous story, and I'm just kind of learning these things. It was amazing to see just how much the conspiracy theory grew, how it actually came out of a anonymous phone call on a radio show. I want to say it was in Chicago. I could be wrong about that. Where this anonymous phone call came through and this guy just made up this story. And the DJ at the time was talking about it. And then it grew to, the lyrics of Paul is the Walrus, all of this big looped in, almost circular theory of this cover up is fascinating. And like I've spent 3 days just reading over insane fan theories, and part of me makes it, part of me loves it because I love a good conspiracy theory. Part of me is just kind of fascinated by how godlike these individuals were, that they inspired these things. No, and I realize, like, yes, the Beatles are bigger than God, but to the point that there is now apocrypha, like there's legend about these figures. Is like, this is literally 21st century mythology at this point.
It's essentially folklore.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And like this book in and of itself does a really great job of diving into it, laying it out, and in a really quick read, a really quick narrative read, immersing you into the mental headspace of John Lennon at the time that this was done. Fascinating read. Okay. And like history nerd.
So here's some of the major clues, just because I'm right by the CDs here. Again, there is the song "I Am the Walrus," which was released in 1967, the following year on the White Album. There's a lyric in Glass Onion that says the walrus was Paul. On the Magical Mystery Tour cover, the walrus is in black. Ooh. The biggest clues, though, in regards to Paul's death, are on the Abbey Road cover. You will see here on the where's my finger there? Yeah, there's my finger there. Okay. You can barely see it here, but why am I I can't do this here. I'm seeing the reverse. Right by George, you'll see that there's a Volkswagen Beetle, and the sub-license on that says 28 if Paul had lived at this point. Also, Paul, who in some circles was called Fall, fake Paul, is walking along Abbey Road. He is smoking a cigarette, indication of danger. And also, he is not wearing shoes, and it is very common in England for people to be buried without their shoes.
Mm-hmm.
So,
not only that, but John Lennon is dressed in white as the minister.
Yes, as the minister. The minister, family member, gravedigger.
Yeah. So one of the jokes in one of the articles I was reading says, even in the mythological fake thing, Ringo gets the shitty job. So, Bill, you need this. You've got to.
Yeah, I'll eventually get it. I did want to bring this book out just for this is from a narrative perspective where my love for the Beatles really started. Was a book called The Beatles Forever. It came out in 1978. I read it. I went into like this flurry of activity after Lennon was shot and killed. I think a lot of people did, and more than any other book, this made me a fan because it's a love letter to the band, but it's a love letter that isn't through rose-colored glasses. Their faults are exposed, but it doesn't ever get salacious. There's many salacious Beatles books out there. It's written by Nicholas Schaffner, and Nicholas Schaffner was a very early AIDS casualty. He died in January of 1982, I believe. So there is a gay connection in a sense. He also has another book, The British Invasion. If I could ever find another copy of it, I'd grab it. My copy is in pieces just because I read it so much. But and especially where it's an account that ends at 1978, that's valuable, I think. And if you can ever find a copy of this, The Beatles Forever from McGraw-Hill, I'd say grab it if it's under like $20. So, my Beatles moment. Yeah. And I think the Beatles are, as a band, are very well represented in comic graphic literature. Whether it's the George Perez special in the 70s, that was some of his best work up until that time. The Marvel Comics color special that they did. Again, the Fifth Beatle that we've talked about on this show. Yes, last week in the episode that hasn't yet been released. Sorry. We did briefly talk about a book, Babies in Black, about their early period with Astrid and Stu Sutcliffe in Hamburg. I do think they're a band that and there's also maybe not as beautiful, but there actually was a Beatles miniseries from Rock and Roll Comics, The Beatles Experience, which I just happen to have a copy here. Comic books that were contemporaneous from 1964, these Beatles exploitation books that came out. They've probably been the best represented band in comic form apart from Kiss, I think. Yeah. Okay, I guess I have the floor, so I'll talk about the book I want to talk about now. And one thing I love about our show is we influence each other. I know that I think all of us have picked up a book from a recommendation that we've made on the show or in some other fashion. I mean, most recently, I talked about the New Deal by Jonathan Case, and Steve now has a copy. So, I love this stuff. And this was a book, of course, I was going to read, but Brian had talked about it a few weeks ago. And despite some turbulence with my DCBS shipment from the last month, I did eventually get a copy of the Green Lantern 80th anniversary special, with this amazing cover by Liam Sharp, who is the current artist on the Green Lantern that's in its second rotation season, I think they call it, with Grant Morrison. And between the action and detective Wonder Woman and Flash anniversary issues and these 80th anniversary books that have been coming out, by my estimation, this is far and away the best. You cover all the major Green Lanterns, from Alan Scott up to Simon Baz, and even some of the tertiary, I don't want to say tertiary, but Joe Mullen from Far Sector is at least represented in a pinup. Same situation with Teen Lantern and the character from Legacy. This book has a lot of contributions from Green Lantern writers past. Naturally, we have Jeff Johns. We sadly have the last comic story published by Denny O'Neil. In this, Denny O'Neil revisits his Green Lantern, Green Arrow period, and with Mike Grell, who drew that run in the late 70s. And I think even more than Legion, kind of put him on the map a bit. I don't know, that just was my perception as a young lad. Fantastic story by James Tynion IV of Alan Scott, again in the Earth 2 New 52 book. They established that Alan Scott was gay, and this seems to work in this new continuity of Alan Scott, and that is an element that they kept in a beautifully told story about hiding who you are in the 1940s. And like all these, a really good Sinestro story by Colin Bunn. We have our friend Sina Grace tackling Simon Baz. We have a really wonderful Jessica Cruz story by Mariko Tamaki. First time she's handled that character. Robert Venditti has a wonderful story that's a tribute to the main four Earthbound ring wielders in Hal, John, Kyle, and Guy. If you've ever thought a Guy Gardner story couldn't make you cry, read this one. Just a really wonderful collection. Like, as I said, by far and away, the best of these prestige format celebration books that DC has been putting out. And also these secret files in the back that give these write-ups about the various main lanterns. Oh, this was such a well-conceived book. And, again, with the last few weeks of me being indie dominated, I'm so happy to return to my main turf here, and especially happy that it's a book this powerful. And I think if no one has ever read a Green Lantern story, you're not at a disadvantage, because you know what the core is like from this book. It's really a wonderful book, and I can't think of anything that's touched this for favorite single issue for me this year.
Yeah. Is Kilowog in it?
Of course, Kilowog's in it.
Of course.
It's a surprise story for Kilowog.
Yeah,
Kilowog is in for a surprise in it, and it's wonderful.
I had to ask. He's got to show up once an episode.
Yeah, from now on.
Somebody gets called a poozer.
I got to get a Kilowog figure.
I have to agree with Bill. I think this was one of the better of the 80th anniversary or commemorative supersized issues that we've had in the past couple of years. I mean, and we've had a lot with DC, because we have, we had Superman, we had Batman, we had Robin, we had Catwoman and Wonder Woman and all. But this, I think, is really excellent. I enjoyed every one of the stories, and the great thing about this is that it definitely shows, for a character like Green Lantern, where you've had so many Green Lanterns sort of as the center of their books. I mean, you had Alan, you had Hal Jordan, you had John, you had although it is interesting about the Guy Gardner one, that very interesting about that one. But I loved reading each of those stories, because it felt like exactly something that would have been told in that particular era, and that particular version of Green Lantern. I
completely fitting in any continuity.
Yeah, totally.
And I just love how you got a flavor of all of them. There's maybe 2 panels with Salic, and he's completely 100% Salic. It is such a well-crafted story. And I know, Brian, one of the things that you had talked about was the lack of a Grant Morrison story as the current writer. And I think because Grant Morrison's run isn't over yet, I think it would have been disruptive. Though I say that with the caveat that the annual story that he had, which was Hal returning to Earth and dealing with his cousin Airwave, was, for me, so far the best issue. So maybe that's a little bit faulty, but I don't think it suffers for the lack of Morrison in it. Yeah.
It would have been nice, but it's not. Yeah, there was so much other good
and Mogo.
content. That
Mogo.
There's a Mogo
awesome.
appearance.
Yeah. And we got the F. Sharp Bell Lantern, too.
I love to see Cullen Bunn.
Yes.
Yeah. And a good Sinestro story, too, which isn't always part and parcel. So. All right. Any other quickie books people want to talk about before we get to Woofs?
Quickie books. Well,
I've got a book with quickies in it, but I will save that for a future episode.
I also have a book. I'm going to see if I can show this without breaking any. I'll show you just about as much of the cover that I can without causing scandal. This is Faithless 2, Volume 2, Number 2. Tulalote. I've been getting the Tulalote connecting covers, and because it's Tulalote, I love her stuff. People who've been listening to the show forever know how much I love her. It's gorgeous. It is smutty. You cannot display this to your grandma. Well, unless your grandma's kind of, a libertine. But yeah, if she likes smutty smut. But it is absolutely gorgeous and beautiful. And the book is fun too. Like, I mean, Faithless, again, I can't recommend this to anybody under the age of 18 without probably getting, angry letters from their mothers or whatever. But it's beautiful. And if you don't mind smut, definitely Faithless 2. It's a lot of fun. And it's a fun story too. It's a cool story. Lots of witches, if you like.
And it looks like Caleb's got a DC book there.
Well, yeah, you mentioned Robert Venditti as part of the 80th anniversary book. I just want to throw a shout out. Like, I actually hope Robert Venditti gets a chance to jump over and do more Green Lantern in the future, because his work on this book, as far as complex it's weird. I'm sorry. Complex continuities, drawing everything together, presenting a great story, good artist. It's been a lot of fun. So if you haven't been reading Hawkman, go find the first trade of Robert Venditti's run, because he does some really cool stuff that, again, like you said, actually can fit into any continuity of the Hawks, and that's hard.
Yeah,
I absolutely love what he's doing on this book, and I haven't classically been a Hawkman fan, and this kind of made me one. So
I totally agree. If it wasn't for this book, I would still be thinking that Hawkman was the biggest kind of, waste of time, golden age, whatever character. Yeah, I've never been a fan of Hawkman. Never. Until I read Blackest Night. Yes, okay, it's cool. But I've always been more of a Shiara fan. I've been more.
Oh, me too. She's one of my favorite characters.
Yeah, been more Hawkgirl than Hawkman. Hawkman was always just like grunt, smash. I've got problems because I don't know what era I'm from. But with this, Venditti completely solves all of those problems, makes the character as complex as you possibly can make him, but with purpose, and ties everything together from every era of Hawkman, from every writer who's played with him, whether they played with him well or they wrote him hard and put him away wet and featherless. I think Venditti did an amazing job reinventing this character, and I love it. So
okay. All right. Well, when we wrap up an episode of wait a second. I just thought of something, because you talked about Tulalote and Brian talked about Mark Russell. And we probably should give a little bit of bandwidth to the announcement that Mark Russell is discontinuing his relationship with Dynamite Entertainment because of Dynamite Entertainment's CEO, Nick Barucci's involvement in the ComicsGate movement. We probably should talk about that just a tiny bit. Yeah, because this has a lot of implications for a lot of work that Dynamite has lined up. They've always been very dependent upon because of licensing on the majority of their output, but also in securing fairly high-level names for an independent publisher. So I don't know if anybody wants to start with this or where you want to start with this. Just a general discussion that this has some shockwaves up to the point where Dynamite has canceled all of their panels for ComicCon at Home. Yeah.
Was it really worth selling a few low-budget porn covers to completely tank your publisher? Because that's exactly what's happened. They are hemorrhaging artists. All the people who wanted these things made weren't going to do anything more than once for a boob Vampirella cover. Yeah. And now they're losing licenses and at risk of losing licenses with things like 007, like some heavy hitter books. Did you really think that the people who own the 007 licenses were going to be okay with you jumping into bed with somebody who was kicking it with Vox fucking Day for a little bit? Like, was that your master? Like, there have been better ideas.
There have been, and I think this is probably going to be maybe the biggest impact of anything related to ComicsGate backlash. Because there have been artists, there have been writers that have been fired from books, or have been disassociated from books that they were working on, or disinvited from working on books with many other publishers. This Dynamite, I mean, like you said, this is where big name writers, big name artists go to play with characters that they otherwise wouldn't get to write or play with. You've got the public domain characters, but you've also got some other fun things that Dynamite has licensed over the years that you wouldn't expect some of these writers to be really excited about writing, or some of these artists to be really, looking forward to working on. And some really, some great work has come out of Dynamite.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, for them to just kind of because they're known, of course, one of the biggest jokes is you have a Dynamite book, it's got 50 different variant covers, a few of your variants tanking your entire publisher is just your entire, lineup is just, that is ridiculous.
Do you know if Gail Simone ever said anything? Because I know there was a
she had made a statement about it was effectively saying I'm still digesting it, because one thing that has been a commonality from what you've heard from a lot of these creators is that they really enjoyed working for Dynamite.
Yeah,
is that they really enjoyed working for this. So there was I think some of them there's some degree of shock value right now in the delivery of this development, and I also think that there's a lot of, I think there's some sadness there. I know that there are Dynamite personnel that are decidedly to the left. So God knows what that working atmosphere is like right now. And, just a lot of weird small things like Battlestar Galactica completely disappearing from their website.
Yeah.
Over the weekend. Despite, them literally publishing hundreds of Battlestar Galactica comics.
With the Cylons.
Yeah, and I'm just interested in hearing about what Alex Ross's perception of this is, because he's decidedly for our purposes on the side of the Angels, and with his very advanced participation involvement with the Project Superpowers line. That the boys accounts for, I think, 30 to 35% of their revenue right now. I can't imagine that's something that Garth Ennis would want to be in bed with. So this is going to be some interesting developments. I'm not one for cancel culture, because I think it in some ways doesn't provide people to grow sometimes, but this wasn't just retweeting a friggin' Cyberfrog cover. This was a lot more involvement than that, and
there's a big difference between cancel culture and getting what you deserve culture. ComicSgate is a hate group, flat out. There is no beating around that bush. It's a hate group, and all this is, and they've tried it several times, is certain people, but not even worth mentioning their names, reaching out and trying to regain a foothold in the comics industry for some sense of legitimacy. They've tried it with different publishers. They keep trying it because their grift is drying up. Yeah. Because they've only been able to put out, yes, they've made six figures and something has bought them a house and a pool, but they've put out maybe 100 pages of comics in 2 years. Their grift is dry, and all the people who were part of ComicSgate, who actually were producing books and moving out, have been ostracized by this hate group now because they were fucking up the grift. It's a hate group that
the hate groups can't wait to eat their own.
Yeah, that's 100% what it is. And now they're looking for ways to regain a foothold and regain legitimacy in actual comics, because then they can get back into going and selling original art. They can get back in the convention scene. They can go back and all these other tangential sideways where you get to network and you meet people and you actually facilitate the motivation of your career. They don't have access to that because they're bigots, and they should never have access to that again. And if the leaders of Dynamite thought that this was going any other way, they're wearing blinders, because there was like Gail Simone is one of their favorite targets. One of their favorite part. And James Figueroa said it in the comments.
Yeah, very good comment from James there.
Yeah.
She is the impetus of revitalizing Red Sonja. Like you wouldn't have Mark Russell on that book if you hadn't have had Red Sonja on that book.
Yeah. I mean, there's. I'm sure that in somebody's justification and let's be honest, it's one person really who was making this decision. But in there, they were working their both siderism, which is a lot of justification for
and which there is some evidence with Dynamite being one of the publishers that went in with contributions to Black Lives Matter through Humble Bundle.
Oh, yeah.
There is
a balance. Like no, you don't.
There is a balance
situations where you don't balance. Like you don't. No.
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 There's
no balance to that. That's not balance. That's just,
and it's really backfired on now, because now like everybody who was like, how could you do this, we're done with you, they left, and they're hemorrhaging creators and people who are buying their books. And also because they dropped what they were going to do and they cut ties with the ComicSgate people, now all the ComicSgate people are just trashing them all over their feeds
because of one drop cover.
Because of one drop cover.
Roger Preeb.
Clearly, it must have somebody's had. Oh, this will be worth it. No.
Now we have a troll on the 11 o'clock comics group that. Woo.
Yeah. I don't see.
I had to say something today. And I'm usually not the one to say. It's usually Caleb.
Yeah.
So, but I kind of had to say something today.
Oh.
Well, yeah.
Well, we put
also there's just the puzzling thing is for a company that is, I think, maybe only IDW, this comes in to a more advanced degree of being so dependent on licenses that you would take a stand like this. That just baffles me unless it is one of those situations where you're in an echo chamber and there's no consequence. That's the only thing I can think of, because I just thought Berushi was a better businessman than that.
Yeah.
We had a couple comments here I want to throw up. James, talking about it's not really cancel culture, it's consequence culture. He agrees with Caleb. They get exactly what they deserve, and they can have covers by that third-rate Brian Ballin wannabe. Sing.
Yeah.
And then we got Zach Davis. I guess he's out once, now that Mark Russell's done with Red Sonja. And I agree. That was the only thing I was reading from Dynamite. Unfortunately, it was what Mark was doing. So,
well, I was reading Project Superpowers, and Gail Simone was just I think she just
wrapped up Death Defying Devil.
Yeah, Death Defying Devil. So I'm whatever.
I think my advance orders are Green Hornet.
I've already got everything that Project Superpowers put out. Everything.
And that's Scott Lobdell writing it, so I don't think he's gonna jump.
Well, Lobdell might be in the comics period anyway. So,
but that's what I mean. They need a home.
So, oh well.
Though, apparently they retracted the cancellation for Red Hood.
Well,
Did you see that?
Isn't it being retooled into something else? I mean, just kind of like
initially it's supposed to. It was Lobdell was ending at 50, and the title was ending at 50, and now there was no final issue designation on the solicit.
Yeah, I think I interpreted that as Lobdell was off at 50, and that was the end of Red Hood Outlaw, and then they would just re-evolve.
Yeah, I just don't know. Maybe there's some plans. I don't know.
Probably.
Or maybe they just forgot to put final issue on them.
Oh, that thing's still going? Oh, man.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh.
But there's some other farewells. Justice League Odyssey is going. That's kind of a mercy killing.
I've been reading it and enjoying it. I
need something to happen. I mean, it's been 6 issues of nothing with characters that I really like, but nothing's happening.
Yeah.
So...
you've got a great dynamic with the cat Red Lantern. I can never remember his name.
Dexstar.
Dexstar.
Together. Jesus.
Dexter and Blackfire and Jessica Cruz, and it's a fun. And Orion. I mean, you've got
and Orion who knows he's an asshole.
Oh yeah,
I really like the way Abnett writes Orion. I would love to see him on like a New Gods property proper.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I've been enjoying the characters, but this book has spent a lot of time spinning its wheels for several issues before moving on to the next step. So
and they got to get some of these characters back to Earth. I mean, they're way out there. So
they've been stuck in that forgotten zone or whatever for way too long.
All right. So we had our little interlude here with talking about the Dynamite ComicsGate experience. So
it's the worst ride at Six Flags.
I just using experience. I used that last week with 2 weeks ago with Tom Kelly and the Tom Kelly experience. I don't know. I get stuck in a rut, baby. Can't help it. All right. So when we wrap up an episode of the Comic Book Bears podcast up, we do so with a segment we call the Woofs of the Week segment, where we highlight something, whether it be a television series or a film or a charitable initiative, anything under the sun that we think you, fair listener or viewer, may be interested in sampling. I'll start as usual with Steve. Steve, what is your Woof of the Week?
Well, no surprise to anybody. It's a TV show. So I know we kind of mentioned it the last time that we were together, but Cursed has been released on Netflix as of last week. By the time of this streaming, and I knew absolutely nothing about Cursed prior to it coming out. And then, of course, I started watching it. I gave it an episode and was hooked. Actually, was really enjoying it. It's not great. It's not the best show out there, but it's pretty good for a Netflix series that, whatever. But it's based on a book by Tom Wheeler and Frank Miller. And one of the things that came out from the show being released is that they worked together, they collaborated on the idea, but Frank Miller actually wrote more of the book, whereas Tom Wheeler is taking a lot of the duties for writing the show. So he's the main writer on the TV series. What's the show about, you might ask, if you've somehow missed all of the Netflix, Blitz previews every time you turn on the app. It is basically a interesting retelling of the Arthurian legend through the eyes of Nimue, the lady in the lake. So you find out more about her. She's played by Catherine Langford, doing an excellent job. She's not just 13 Reasons Why. She actually does have a pretty good range here. She does an excellent job being a superpowered sorceress, the queen of the Fae, etc. As the show progresses, she is tasked by her mother to bring the sword of power to Merlin, and Merlin is played by one of the Skarsgårds, and I think these guys were laughing at me. I'm like, they're all tall. They're all exactly 6'4". Every single one of them. They're all 6'4". They all look very different, but Gustav is kind of hot.
If you watched Vikings, it's the same actor that played Floki.
Yes. And so, just tall and bearded and, I don't know, oozing sex, which is basically, and I read this hilarious thing, this hilarious article pointing out that Frank Miller and Tom Wheeler, or at least in the film, maybe more so in the series than the book, have essentially written John Constantine as Merlin, because this Merlin wears a pretty kick-ass trench coat-like thing, and drinks all the time, and has sex with every single available female that he comes across. And also, has a lot of dark past, blah, blah, blah. But I had a lot of fun with the show. It's great. The Arthur character is very interesting in this. Not what most people would have expected. Uther Pendragon is, of course, represented. And the church, or the Crimson Guard, basically has a big role in this, in destroying the magical creatures and the fairies of the world. But if you want to give it a shot, it's 10 episodes, 10 hours out of your life. It's very fun in parts. It actually keeps up a pretty good pace. So give it a shot. Cursed.
I will eventually watch it because I watch all things Arthurian.
Yeah.
If you went around the corner, you'll see a lot of like, why do you have this? A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court. You'd be like, why do you have this?
You better be reading Once and Future. Have you been reading that?
I have it. I have not been reading it.
Did Steve just wag his finger?
I'm pointing it. You better.
That's all right.
Wait,
I
wait.
even wrote an Arthurian play once called Majesty,
Really?
which was my attempt at a Rosencrantz and Guildenstern thing.
Oh.
Yeah.
I love Rosencrantz and Guildenstern.
It wasn't very good because I was 22.
Oh.
I tried, but yeah, I'm a sucker for Arthurian things. But I'll eventually get to this. It's not really the top burner. And unfortunately, Steve, yours is one of the few opinions I've heard that has been positive.
Yeah.
I've heard a lot of negative stuff about this.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if it was a situation where if you had bailed on the first episode, if there was something where there was something a bit more robust about the series that
Yeah, I think this is definitely one of those Netflix series, and there's a bunch of those series out there where if you watch just the first episode, you're probably, if you're on the fence, you're going to be the kind of person who's like, I've seen enough, I'm done, and then move on. If you give it a couple more episodes, if you're on the fence, you should, you'd probably like it a little bit more. I mean, again, I'm not saying it's the best thing on the channel on the app or whatever that's out streaming right now, but I think it's really good. To give it a chance. It's got some great performances and some, really fun actors to watch. So
Roger watched it and liked it. So if that says anything, you've at least got Roger on your side.
Yay! Woohoo!
Okay, moving over to Brian. Brian, what? Oh, okay. All right, moving over to Brian. Brian, what is your wolf of the week?
So I've had like 3 different things I was gonna do and say for my wolf, and I have evolved over the course of the last 2 hours or hour and a half, whatever we're at. But I just saw on Facebook, friend of the show. I don't think we've ever had him on, but William O. Tyler. He has been on the show? I don't remember.
No, but the thing is, he one of the characters that was part of. Oh my God, what's the name of it? It was the with an O. I have it over there. Tom was
Strong?
with THOM was the writer artist.
Oh,
yeah. Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yes,
yeah.
Oh, I'm so embarrassed by this because we've had him on and not Oblivion.
I know what you're talking about though.
But anyway, there's a character in that graphic novel based on Tyler. So.
Oh, okay. Well, so
Yep.
randomly, like, we're Facebook friends, and I haven't talked to him, but we ran into each other and kind of met in San Diego ComicCon 3 years ago. And anyway, long story short, he shared this thing that this panel that they're doing for ComicCon at Home, and it's from Prism, and it's a list of amazing creators paying tribute to Howard Cruz, the godfather of queer comics that we were just talking about with Stuck Rubber Baby. So, Justin Hall, Jennifer Campbell, Karen Green, Tara Madison Avery, Diana DeMassa, Trina Robbins, Dennis Kitchen, Roberta Gregory, Rupert Kinnard, Robert Kirby, Steve McIsaac, Awan Mance, I don't know, Andy Mangels, another person who we know, Robert Triptow, and William O. Tyler is on the panel, and Ivan Velez Jr. Like, all of this great talent is going to be talking about Howard Cruz, and if you're only very vaguely familiar, if you only read Stuck Rubber Baby, or you've read his the strip he did, which I forgot the name of the ongoing strip one he did for years. It was like a person's name, but like the first queer comic creator in terms of having like published queer comics. Wendell, sorry, came back to me. Anyway, that panel is going to be amazing, and it's free. We were talking about it earlier. Like, you just go to the site, and they're going to be up on YouTube. So even if you missed it live, you can go back and watch it.
Yeah,
for free.
they're all going to be up there.
Yeah,
I shared it on our Comic Bears page. So if you're interested, you guys can check it out. But I'm very excited for this. I'm really happy that it's happening. With all this stuff going on, it could easily have been overlooked that we lost such a giant this year, last year, God, whatever it was.
Yeah. Just last year.
But yeah, so if you're interested, check it out. go up to our Facebook page and you can find the link.
Okay, yeah, it's also worth noting that Prism put out a really good guide to LGBT content for ComicCon at Home, which you can access. Tonight there was an LGBT television characters panel. I think that started airing as we were prepping for this, so there is some content there. But yeah, I'll definitely be planning on checking that out at some point. I'm like, as soon as it all came back to me, the book was Oculation by Tom Collins.
Yes.
So sorry about that, Tom, if by any chance you were listening. But
Inoculation is by the way excellent and beautiful. It's a beautiful book.
Yeah, senior moments here. Sorry, folks. So let's move over to Caleb. Caleb, what is your wolf of the week?
All right, my wolf of the week goes out to a documentary. So if you know me, you know I'm kind of like a little Bill. I love music. And while my music tastes have grown exponentially as I've gotten older, most of it is steeped in like 2000s nu metal. I was very much a nu metal kid. Loved my Jinko jeans. # thanks, Mom. Part of that experience was me falling in love with a Canadian nu metal band that was all women. And I'd say women at the time, they were teenagers. And that band is Kitty. And Bill's laughing because we had a conversation I know he's going to say later. But so Kitty, if you don't know it, it's a band made up of all these, at the time they were girls, like 99, 98 when they got together. They've had several members come in and out of the band, but mostly it's the Landers sisters, Morgan and Mercedes, who have been like constant through the thing. And they put out some of, I love their music, but they put out some incredibly heavy music that is fun to listen to. They get a little bit of, there's a little bit of operatic stuff. And they really did, whether you like their music or not, they did open the door for women in hard rock and heavy metal. You wouldn't have bands like OTEP if it wasn't for Kitty. Evanescence wouldn't have been as a thing. And I know he's freaking out. And so if you go on Prime, there is a documentary that kind of walks all the way through their inception when, like I said, 15 or 16 years old, all the way through now. They've sold, I think, over something like 6 million records, which is insane. It's awesome. I had the chance back when I was 18, a much younger man. I had a part-time job at Hot Topic in the mall when I was trying to put myself through college the first time. My boss was friends with Morgan and Mercedes. Had a chance to get to meet them. Super cool. So when I saw the documentary on there and they went through all of their iterations, but also there is like actual really good footage of how they produced their albums. So they took cameras in with them. And if you're a music nerd, if you're a process junkie, they talk to the producers. They show you inside the studios. They walk you through some of how they got the sounds and the equipment they used. And for that aspect alone, it's worth watching if you're into music at all. But also if you're into metal, it's just fun. It's good times. And I like metal. So that was the gayest shrug that has ever happened when the word metal was used.
I like metal.
I like metal.
I like metal.
Actually, funny enough, I first heard and saw Kitty not in person, but on TV, and heard them a lot when I was up at school because I was, up in the Great White North at that time between 98 and 2002. So yeah, they were up there. I think they were on at least CBC Radio 3 was all Canadian rock music, and especially on Grant's show, you would have 4 hours of just only Canadian new acts, rock, metal, rap, folk.
They hit top 50 on the Billboard chart several times. Like Headbangers Ball loved this band. So yeah. Bill did not.
Bill had a moment.
He's verklempt.
You can't say anything nice. Don't say anything at all.
I will say this,
and it's gonna get a zoink.
And this is gonna come out much harsher than it should, but I did see Kitty live once, and I like it when my friends like music. But one thing I will say that we are coming onto a period with rock documentaries where we have acts that are very well represented by archive video.
Mm.
This was important. A very different band, Spandau Ballet, but they had a documentary come out 4 years ago,
Yeah.
and they really were, with forming in the late 70s and their first record coming out in the spring of 1980. That's like the cusp of a lot of documentation, whether it be footage of them recording, television appearances. I mean, we have 2 minutes and 13 seconds of the Beatles at the Cavern Club. That's what we've got on video. So it is interesting how a number of these documentaries that are being structured around new bands. I don't want to say new bands. They've had a recording career for 22 years. The band you're referencing, but it is interesting how a number of these are being put together, and that's all I'll say. I was looking to see if I had a Kitty record, and I think the only thing I have is maybe one track on an Ozfest
Oh.
collection. Yeah, I don't think I had any.
There's lots of stuff on YouTube you can go listen to.
Yeah, if I wanted to. Yeah. I'm not going to debate because we'll be here all night. But no, seriously, like I do like that you had a documentary that I don't want to necessarily say took you back to a particular time, but there is an emotional reference point to when this band was, I would say, at the very least, at their commercial peak.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that you have that. Okay, I guess that's down to me for the Wolf of the Week, and I'm gonna be woofing something that, if not for it, this podcast might not exist. Ooh, how do you like that? The first free comic book day was in May of 2002. May of 2002, I was a second semester law student. We had an exam where there was confusion whether it was an open book or a closed book test, which delayed taking the test by an hour and a half while they got our professor on the line. And to chill, I went to a local comic store that was around the corner, which was the first free comic book day. And I got my 4 free titles. And that was when it dawned on me, hey, this is cheap entertainment. You have tons of books you've never read before. Your money's very tight because you're in law school and you're putting yourself through. So that's where my interest in comics really rekindled on a big scale. There was, from 97 on, I was buying books on an irregular basis, I would say. But that's when it really started for me, back again from I would say, like a year out from college. So my woof is to the free comic book days that are going on between now and September. And I got my first batch from the books that came out last Wednesday. A local store is doing them on Saturdays, which I think makes a lot more sense. And so for the next, I think 7 weeks, is it? To like the first week of September or so, 7 or 8 weeks that we have free books that you can go and support your LCSs, get your free content, and of course, like I can't like go and grab free books and leave. I always get stuff. Probably the biggest book that came out was the X-Men free comic book day book. I also got My Little Pony because it's free. I got the Power Rangers, the Road to Ranger Slaver. I got Canuck Beyond and Captain Battle, which is Captain Canuck and also a particular public domain character, Captain Battle. Asterix, which I've never read any Asterix, so I'll do that. And a book that I don't think they were supposed to give away yet, which was the free Firepower book. I thought this was like 2 weeks away. But, as a mechanism to support your local comic shops, and provided that there weren't any substantial safety issues, because we'd rather keep you around than you going to get free comic book day and catch a particular virus that's out there. If you're in a situation in a locality where you can do this, please go out and support, because it's always been a great movement. And I can't believe at this point it's 18 years old. That's wild.
It's surprising to me that it's only 18 years old. It feels like it's been around for a lot longer, but it was definitely not around when I was a kid reading comics, because that would have been pretty welcome. Babysitting money only went so far.
I also see that Joe Pisano was watching. Joe, I hope you caught some of the Beatles discussion. Joe's a very big Beatles fan. And Matt Greenwood right back at you. Go Pack Go. So my public, how they love me.
Hey, at least they're not the Washington football team.
The Washington football team. How I enjoy the Washington.
On the other hand, man, that Seattle expansion hockey team,
Awesome.
The Kraken, what a logo, man.
That logo was amazing.
That is amazing, yeah.
Hey, Charlotte just got a
Yay.
football team, as in soccer.
Yeah. Tell us more about it.
He tried. He tried so hard.
They have a logo and everything. The colors are blue and black and white.
All right. Well, we're going to wrap this one up in a bow. Again, we are the Comic Book Bears podcast. You can find us on the Twitter and the Tumblr and sort of the Instagram as Comic Book Bears. You can find us on the Facebook as Comic Book Bears Podcast. If you want to listen to us, please do so by downloading us through iTunes, listening to us through Stitcher Radio, or catching us on some of the other podcatching platforms. And if you want to write to us, please do so by sending an email to comicbookbears@gmail.com. Until next time, I'm Bill Zanowitz.
I'm Brian Pittard.
I'm Steve Morey.
I'm Caleb Alexander McKenzie.
You're going to hear a woof and an explosion. We'll be back real soon. Take care, everyone.